First of all, thank you for coming. And before that clock starts, I just want to thank Lenny and his cast of characters for organizing this, because as the first person, it's a great idea, and I think that I speak for my colleagues, it's a pleasure to be here. I think today, so you can start the clock now. There we go. 3 seconds into it. If you're at all politically conscious in the world today, it's kind of a cool time, in a perverse sort of a way, because so much of the world is in revolt. If you look at North Africa, the Middle East, nearly every country is, you could take that picture from that happens to be Libya. Folks are trying to overthrow governments, they're fighting with governments, we're intervening against governments. And one of the puzzles that I try and answer is, why do folks do that? And the idea that I want to get across today, and I'm going to do it in a different sort of a way, is that people rise up in response to structural inequities. Now, if you listen to the news, the pundits, the journalists, and a whole lot of my colleagues, academics, they'll try and convince you that people take these risky steps either in pursuit of equality, so they're trying to fight to generate an equal relationship for themselves. Or what you hear more often is they fight over ethnic or religious or cultural hatreds. And I think those are the wrong models. So what I want to do is suggest a different way to think about why people rebel, and that would be structural inequities. And I want to point out what I mean by structural inequities, and then I'm going to take you on a tale to how I got to that point. So by structures, I simply mean the political arrangements, the laws, the institutions that really determine who lives at the top of the hill and who lives in the shanty town at the bottom, who gets a good education, who doesn't get an education, who gets a job, who doesn't get a job, who lives a long life, who doesn't live a long life. And those are all over the world we live in. I'll give an example in a minute that will resonate with you. By inequities, I simply mean injustice, really. That if you look up inequity in the dictionary, it will define it in terms of injustice, favoritism, unfairness, those types of things. So if you put the two together, folks are rising up over structures that create an injustice. And I think that will account for much of what we see today in the world. The ideas are ancient in origin. Really, all of the holy books describe, of the major religions, describe injustice, inequities, unfairness, favoritism. It's easy in interpretation. Hopefully by the time I'm done, you'll be able to readily see how a political structure can create inequities and how those inequities can create an environment where maybe you too would rise up against your government. And I think the implications are profound. So this is profound, shifting it from cultural hatred or equality to political laws and institutions that create an injustice. And they're profound because it'd be a hell of a lot easier for us to right structural conditions than it is to eliminate cultural hatreds. So let me give you an example of what I mean by structures and the inequities that go with it. I'm going to pull from this country. Jim Crow laws in this country determined who could drink at which drinking fountain, who could go into which motel, who could sit at which lunch counter, who could get what job, who could go to what school. And they were designed systematically to allow whites to get the good things and blacks to get the bad things. And we all know about those laws. They exist in different ways today. Convicted felons who cannot vote in elections. So if laws systematically convict a certain group of people and then they turn them into non-voters, then you systematically generate a more difficult time for one group of people over another. And it's no accident that blacks in this country have a harder time than whites getting things. Now, if that exists in the United States of America, then it's easy to think of it existing everywhere. And so what I want to try and demonstrate is that it exists all over the place. And if you could deal with the structural conditions, you could deal with some of the motivations that drive the types of behavior we see today. Now, this is a forum on education, reinventing education, I think, which I take to be knowledge creation and knowledge dissemination. So rather than try and convince you of the veracity of my ideas, which in my intellectual world is driven by confronting argument with evidence, and I could make that case, I think. Some of you have seen me try and make that case. I'm going to take you on a journey of how I got to this point. And I suppose it's a good point. But so I'm going to talk about my pathway, and then we'll come back to how we think about it at the end. Today it's about argument and evidence. When I first started down this path in a little different way, I was your age and I was a college student, and my university invested its endowments, some of its endowment, in companies that did business in apartheid South Africa. So I got involved in a group that was trying to change that, and it's just a form of structure. Apartheid was a legal structure in South Africa that determines who got what, who got the good stuff, who got the bad stuff, based solely on racial characteristics. So at one point in this group involvement, the group, and I was not part of the organizer of the group, they decided that they were going to take the board of trustees of the university hostage by locking them in at the trustees meeting, and they asked me if I would participate. And I knew the consequence of that was quite dramatic, and I didn't know enough about apartheid, so I did some research. I started looking into what apartheid really meant, and in that process I came across a speech, a statement that Nelson Mandela made to the panel of judges who were going to sentence him to life in prison or death. And this is what he said: Africans fight against poverty and the lack of human dignity, both of which are entrenched in legislation. The complaint of the Africans is not that they are poor and the whites are rich, but that the laws made by the whites perpetuate the situation. The structure created a human indignity. I understood that, and as somebody your age, I participated in the nonviolent civil disobedience. We did not change the policy of our government, but that's life. Some years later, I began, for reasons that 18 minutes don't provide me the opportunity to explain, I began to puzzle over the question of why some people loved without barriers and others, which were most, simply put barriers between human beings. So blacks would like blacks, whites would like whites, but blacks didn't like blacks. Love is probably a better word to use. Jews and Muslims, Christians and Protestants. It was easy to have an emotional bond with likeness than it was with difference. And the place to me where that just really leaked out was in the destitute. So when the people can give nothing back because they're destitute, then actually tying an emotion to them would be a very difficult thing to do because there's no payoff. So, being my want, I quit my job. I packed all my belongings in a duffel bag that when I put it on a scale at the airport, it weighed 6.8 kilos. So I had this kind of funky feeling at the time. My whole life weighs 14 pounds. And I went off to try and find Mother Teresa, because to me, she epitomized the person who could do this. By a series of fortuitous events, I ended up in Delhi with a package that had Mother Teresa's name on it and her address on it. And so I had a way to go find her and talk to her. So I got on a train, I went to Calcutta, and I rang the doorbell of Mother Teresa's home. I suppose by luck, Mother Teresa wasn't there. She was out of the country. And her aide said, well, why don't you take the opportunity to work at the Nimralhar Day, which is, we generally know it as the home for the destitute and the dying. The next day I walked through the door of that building and found a life that was simply incomprehensible in many ways. I bathed, I fed, I clothed people. That's with a cool bowl. What I would have to do is hold the human up with a spoon, the cup in one hand, a spoon in the other, and you pour it down into their mouth. And since they were so close to death, these people live a day, 2 days, something like that, maybe a week at the house. We would excrete it right out the minute you put it in. So your task was to feed them and then change them. So you put your bowl down, you do that, and they would have soiled themselves. So you have to strip them naked, take the bed linen off, take their clothes off. And these people who would die in a day were the most demanding people you ever met in your life. And it was frustrating in being. You'd give them a shirt and they'd look and they have a stain on it. I wear clothes with stains all the time. They'd reject it if they had a stain on it. And after it got past the maddening point, I started to realize these people are demanding exactly what Nelson Mandela demanded, the right to human dignity. And once you figured that out, that even these people didn't demand equality or hatred or anything like that. They just demanded to be treated like a human being up till the day they died, which was probably tomorrow. So it's kind of weird. This is what they look like. A few years went by, and I started to think about civil wars. Not about civil wars as I do today from an intellectual tradition, but from a social policy. The United States was orchestrating some wars down in Central America, and I couldn't figure out whether the freedom fighters that Ronald Reagan called the freedom fighters were the right ones, or the ones that all the left-wing groups called the freedom fighters were the right one. So I packed up that same duffel bag, probably with 14 pounds of stuff in it, and I headed down to Central America to see if I could find some of the soldiers that were fighting in the wars and find out from them who was right and who was wrong. By dint of luck, I have no other way to describe it but luck sometimes. I spent a day in a refugee camp of Nicaraguans fleeing the Sandinista government, and it was mostly parents who were sending their sons back to fight against the Sandinista government. And I bivouacked with the Sandinista soldiers who were fighting the sons of the parents that I just left a couple of days before. Nobody, not one of them talked about hatred. Not one of them talked about equality. They all talked about give us a fair system. We want a fair shot at what happens. Okay, I'm not sure I figured out who were the right ones and who was the wrong ones, but there are a lot of kids and young adults doing this type of stuff, taking a very big risk in pursuit of change, and their change that they described was about a fair shot at opportunity, what I today call a structure, a fair structure. Time goes on, and I start to think about wars as an intellectual pursuit, and with a tradition well established, I started to think about when I would do it. Because if you actually ask yourself when you would rise up against your government, you get a different flavor for what it takes to do that. So I again packed up a smaller duffel bag this time because I was hoping it wouldn't last so long. And I set out to try and meet armed resistance fighters. My criteria, rebel soldiers. My criteria was that I could get into an armed zone and get out alive, and that was about it. So I set off to Palestine to try and meet with some of these folks, and after some time of talking to falafel salespeople, taxi drivers, people on buses and trains, I found myself in a locked room with two members of the Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigade and one member of the Islamic Jihad, a taxi driver who was scared shitless and he didn't want to be there, and a translator and me. And no matter who I asked in this environment, it didn't matter whether it was the falafel salesperson or the taxi driver or the guys with guns, they didn't hate Jews. They wanted a fair shot. The structure that imposed on them was simply unfair, and they were demanding and willing to die for a system that prevented the injustice, gave them an opportunity. The most aggrieved man I met in the whole experience was the highest Christian or Catholic prelate in the Levant area. I believe he was a Catholic bishop of a particular sect of the Catholic Church, and he was steaming mad. I stayed in his compound. I had food cooked by his servants. He had two Mercedes-Benz in the driveway, and he wasn't asking for equality, because equality would mean he'd have to give up some of those Mercedes-Benz and stuff. And he was steaming mad about how the structure determined that he was a Palestinian Israeli, not just an Israeli, and it imposed on him in ways that were unjust. So everybody in Palestine, just like everybody in Nicaragua, just simply demanded structural fairness that came out of that. So let me go back in the few minutes I have to where I started. Structural inequities, I think, are at the core of most of what we see today, at the core of most of the Civil War. These structures are simply political creations by the people who have most of the power. They create a system that allows them to exploit others. And it's important, the importance of thinking about it as a structure rather than a hatred or something like that, is that the structure is easy to change. The structure was created in the first place. The Jim Crow laws were created by white folks, but then they were uncreated also by white folks. It took political pressure. It took a revolution of sorts, the civil rights movement in this country. But we created an environment that simply had a different set of dynamics to it. So I began to puzzle, and I'm going to end on this. I began to puzzle, how in the world would you ever fight to maintain a structure that imposed injustice on another person, another neighbor, another person in your country? And it strikes me that there is some ethical conundrum in that. And it's an ethical conundrum that sometimes we're all going to face in our life. And I think that the day that you wake up fighting to maintain a structural inequity will be the day that you're on the wrong side of the right issue. Thank you.